Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this The Clown Decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. And today, Labour have played an absolute blinder in how not to do any, and I mean any, of your press releases. So, as you'll know from the title, this is all about the breaking news that the UK has now secured a landmark trade deal with India. The agreement will slash tariffs on key products like whisky, cosmetics, and medical devices, and unlock opportunities for businesses across regions and the nations of the UK, which is a very odd press release to release after Starmer just a few weeks ago said globalisation is dead, but here we are with globalisation carrying on, and I'm fine with globalisation just meaning free trade across countries, and if that's all this was, I wouldn't have much of a problem with it. Unfortunately, the devil's in the detail. So the government website had a press release saying it's a huge economic win for the UK as a trade deal with India is agreed, which will deliver for working people and British businesses. Apparently, the deal will slash Indian tariffs on key products such as whisky, cosmetics, and medical devices, locking in reductions on 90% of tariff lines for UK exports to unleash opportunities for businesses across regions and nations of the UK. Good. Trade is good. The tariffs that Trump has been putting in seem to just be bad all around. And this is all delivering for the plan for change as 4.8 billion is added to the UK economy, okay, and 2.2 billion in wages every year in the long run under the deal. Is that 4.8 billion every year, or is that over a period of time? I would assume that is over the Parliament. That is adding about 4 weeks worth of Tesco profit to the economy, this deal. So, okay, it doesn't seem that great in that regard. Anything else? On the British consumer side of things, we will see cheaper prices and more choice on products including clothes, footwear, food products including frozen prawns, as UK liberalises tariffs. Well, I suppose at least that will bring in good competition against the Chinese, who have been getting away with that sort of thing for ages. The deal is expected to increase bilateral trade by 25.5 billion, UK GDP by just under 5 billion, and wages by 2.2 billion each year in the long run. I imagine that's 4.8 billion per year, which is about 0.1% of GDP, which increases growth from about 1.1% to 1.2%, though no doubt that's going to go down as well. UK businesses gain competitive edge over international competitors when entering India's market, as it gets even bigger, forecasted to become the third largest global economy within 3 years. Alright, good. Absolutely nothing in this, by the way, about visas, and nothing in it about the big thing, which is the national insurance exemption, but, well, I'll get into that soon enough. But I will say it does look awfully like Labour are trying to hide that fact of this trade deal, as the Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds is out here saying our landmark agreement with India is the largest ever trade deal secured by the UK, and will help us deliver a plan for change, blah de blah de blah de blah. It's going to boost the economy by literally 0.1% a year at best. Thanks for that. Keir Starmer has also put out a press release saying the trade deal with India will raise living standards, put more money in the pockets of British working people, and deepen the unique ties between our two nations, blah de blah de blah de blah. And there's a little video of him having a fake conversation about the deal as well, but I don't care to go through it. Well, let's see how India are taking this. This was the official government press release. It's a historic and ambitious deal to boost jobs, exports, and national growth. I have to say, I love how amateurish this statement is made on their website too, but, well, let's not go into that. 99% Indian exports to benefit from zero duty, open up massive exports opportunities for labour-intensive sectors such as textile, marine products, blah de blah de blah de blah. We've seen most of that. Significant boost to trade and services such as IT, financial services, and professional services. Stronger strategic alignment, and greater global mobility for aspirational young Indians. What could you possibly mean by greater global mobility for young Indians? I wonder what that could mean. Oh, it's a huge win, with 3-year exemption from social security payments for Indian employees working in the UK. And this is part of the thing that has really annoyed everyone. What this looks like on the face of it is, and what Labour are clearly trying to hide, because they know how this is going to look, is that they have just raised national insurance contributions for employers for workers in the UK, obviously. If you pay national insurance, then it's effectively got to be paid in proportion with whatever the percentage is set by the government. And it was raised recently, and this is why people like me didn't get as much of a raise as we were expecting. It's why a load of businesses are having to fire people or aren't hiring as much as they were. And on the face of it, it looks like, oh, Indians are exempt from that. Now, let's make one thing very, very clear here. What this actually means is that Indian-run companies doing business in the UK, when they send over Indian workers, they can opt out for 3 years of paying national insurance in the UK because, in theory, they are temporary. After 3 years, they have to start paying national insurance. And then the idea of this is because they are hired by an Indian company. The Indian company is paying the wages, and they, therefore, are paying those Indians over in India, and they have to pay, obviously, the social security tax that India has on them. So it's a way of avoiding this double dipping. And it's perfectly reasonable. We have it all over the world with a load of other countries, including the USA, the Netherlands, Korea. There's a big list of it. The problem we have here, though, is that typically you have quite an equalised amount of people moving between, say, America and Britain, South Korea and Britain, the Netherlands and Britain. With India, you've not got many people moving over to India to work there temporarily. With India, with business in the UK, think Tata Steel or Infosys. Yeah, that's multinationals with a rather large workforce in the UK. And with those large workforces, all of a sudden, moving Indians over to Britain, all of a sudden, as I say, becomes really tempting, doesn't it? So when we say this will help out with wages, yeah, maybe for some, but clearly not everyone. And Tata Steel as well. I know they're closing down Port Talbot, but Tata Industries, that's manufacturing. This will be working class people affected by this too, with downward pressure on their wages yet again. So yeah, on the face of it, seems like a reasonable addition to a list of countries we already have this deal with. Problem with India is, though, we don't have a symmetrical labour market. So this exemption doesn't make sense. If anything, it's a way for India effectively to extract more wealth out of the UK because taxes that would be going to the UK Treasury through national insurance all of a sudden just goes to India instead. It's a bad deal. There's no doubt about that. The trade bits, absolutely great. These specific ones about the visas, though, not so great. And it gets worse, by the way. So according to Sky News, both UK workers in India and Indian workers in the UK will only pay tax in their country of origin rather than the one they're living in under the agreement. As I've been through all that. So Indian workers transfer to the UK and their employers won't have to pay national insurance contributions for 3 years. And while the UK said there was no change to its immigration policy, the Indian government said this eases mobility for professionals, including investors, people transferring to the UK within their company, and their partners and children. So they're bringing dependents too. So again, all these anxieties people currently have with immigration and that have been effectively, the lid has been lifted from this thanks to reform. It looks like Labour is still in the ballpark of saying one thing and doing another. Independent professionals like yoga instructors, musicians and chefs. I don't think I'd class any of them as professionals, maybe musicians, but we've got yoga instructors coming over from India and they count as professionals. That begs the question, what else is classed as independent professional? Chefs as well, that's typically one that effectively people will come over on a visa saying they're a professional chef and then work in a kebab shop. Again, not exactly the type of high quality migrants you would be expecting from a government that says it's serious on immigration. This is Tories all over again, effectively, which I don't think anyone's particularly surprised at. So yeah, these visa exemptions, I would say, probably not worth the trade deal. I'm just going to throw it out there. I don't think this is really worth increasing GDP growth by 0.1% a year. But there we go. I think one of the most amazing things about this whole situation, and one way I can really tell there has been a vibe shift on immigration, is that Sky, which is typically more on the left of the political spectrum, I mean, when Brexit was happening, they had a kind of doomsday countdown clock to Brexit Day on their 24-hour news channel. That's how left-wing they are. They're also quite famous for effectively breathing a sigh of emphatic relief when they saw the exit polls of Starmer easily winning. So they were very much on Labour's side, but as you can see from Sam Coates from Sky, he points out that further in the Indian press release, they say it is an unprecedented achievement that India has secured an exemption for Indian workers who are temporarily in the UK and their employees from paying social security to the UK for a period of 3 years under the Double Contribution Convention. Again, standard stuff, but they also make it clear that this actually does make Indian service providers significantly more competitive in the UK. Again, one of the anxieties, the big ones, of immigration is effectively British workers are being replaced by cheaper foreign labour. And this is the Indian press release saying that that is exactly what has happened with this trade deal. And it's kind of no wonder that Labour are at risk of losing an awful lot of their support to the Greens and Reform. To Reform because Reform voters seem to look more at action than words, and Green voters because they seem to only care about words. But for Sky News to be this on the ball for immigration issues, that is a total vibe shift, and I do mean that. Reform have really, really changed up the way some of the elites anyway view the UK. And as far as I'm concerned, this is an absolutely massive win for populism. Maybe it's not as much a delusion as we thought, because Reform largely is a grassroots movement. It really is. They do not have the funding that Labour and the Tories still have. They only have one office in London, and Labour and Tories have multiple across all of the UK. So, as far as I'm concerned, they're still the elites. And yet, everyone is turning on them, including media elites. It's incredible. Sam also goes into more detail on this. The government hasn't done an impact assessment on this today, so we don't even know the cost of this specific change that may come in the future. But they do say it's reciprocal for UK workers. Again, UK workers rarely go over to India. Some do, obviously, but the change of Labour direction is only going to be one way, largely. And for Labour to not do any impact assessment, that's highly, highly embarrassing. And yet they're going off saying, oh, we've done the impact assessment, it's only going to be good for UK wages. But they didn't do an impact assessment for one of the largest wage compressors that comes out of this deal. So you can't trust that number, as you can't trust anything that comes from Labour at all. Why would we be surprised at that? They still go on about the black hole as if it wasn't mostly their fault. Anyway, I think the biggest mask-off moment for all this is, for lack of a better term, all of the Tory boys trying to ride on this free trade wave. And I think this is possibly the worst thing you can do for people who actually want free trade. You can actually have all of this free trade without the mass migration that comes with it, but you wouldn't think that from people like Tom Harwood, who has said what I've been saying, which is the Indian tax agreement only applies to Indians seconded to Britain from a company based in India on a short-term basis. This doesn't apply to Indians generally applying for jobs, and the UK has treaties to prevent the double taxation with 50 countries, as I mentioned before. But you go into detail on this, the one-sided Labour movement that's going to be a result of this, the fact they can bring dependents as well. Okay, sure, they can't access benefits in theory, and they have to pay to use the NHS. It's $1,000 or something a year. I get that argument, I do. The problem comes in with the fact that there are already anxieties about the fact that we're in a recession, about the fact that getting a job is hard, and now more pressure on the labour market is probably one of the worst things you can do. And again, it's just the whole optics of fairness when it comes down to national insurance contributions. Why in God's name did you raise it for Brits just to then cancel it for Indian companies? That seems absurd to me, but they went through with it anyway. This then isn't helped by, well, MPs who recently lost their seat, who were largely on the side of free trade, again, just not really caring about immigration. If you want proof the Tory party hasn't really changed and it's all just more bluster, you just need to look at the likes of Steve Baker here, going on about how it would be great for trade and all that. Oh, but don't worry about the tax issue. We should be celebrating that Labour the government has furthered free trade in the national interest. Oh, just forget about this one anxiety. Just don't believe your lying eyes. No, Steve, this isn't that great. I understand in the abstract, reciprocally beneficial, don't pay each other's tax on workers makes sense in a lot of places. However, when the labour market's going to be so one way, it's not a great deal. It's a concession on our side, and it's a concession for a reason. You did not allow this when you were in government. Why are you pretending it's a good thing now? They're pretending it's a good thing now, because ultimately this was a deal that was started by the Tories, but at least when they were in power they understood, yeah, don't allow these tax exemptions, that'd be stupid. People are already pretty anxious about more migration. And yet, when it goes through, they're actually happy with it. It's unbelievable. Jacob Rees-Mogg is also largely on this side of, thank God we have cheaper food and drink, rice and tea. You know, we might have Indian companies sending over a load of Indian workers because it's cheaper than hiring local Brits, but, you know, at least there's cheaper food. Again, I agree with free trade. I'm fine with free trade. I am for free trade. I am not for it if we have to then have the concession of, to have free trade of goods, you need to have free trade of people. Because we've had that experiment for years, decades even, and it's made Britain a place where effectively a load of people want to leave. who were born here. And all it's making the enemies of free trade say is, oh, well, clearly you can't have it without free movement of people. Sorry, it's nonsense. Total nonsense. Of course you can have the best of both worlds here. And then Daniel Hannan, who is a Tory peer, did a hell of a long essay trying to explain why this is a good thing, actually. And yes, I generally agree with all of the free trade stuff here. But again, he's going on about the national insurance exemption being false. There is a general presumption against double taxation. Fine. All employees of foreign companies get a 12-month exemption. Fine. Britain has reciprocal treaties with several countries. Blah, 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 blah. Foreign employees can't claim pensions or related benefits until they have paid in for 10 years, so it only seems fair. They can have, however, indefinite leave to remain after 5 years as well, so they can actually technically get it earlier. Again, the problem with this isn't necessarily that in the abstract reciprocal social security exemptions are a bad thing. The problem is, as I say, the fact that it's going to be so one-sided, the way the migration's going to work with Labour, that effectively it is just a extraction of UK wealth to India with extra steps. That's largely what it is. And that's ignoring the fact that the multinational Indian companies that we have here are now going to be much more inclined to send Indians over to work for us for 3 years rather than hire people in Britain for 3 years or possibly even longer, because, you know, with the way India works, you can just send people over here for 3 years, right, come back, we'll send another over, right, they've worked 3 years, send another over. It can be a revolving door in that sense. And they're bringing dependents over, which is a very odd thing as well, because if, say, you don't get access to benefits like state schools and things like that, you might think, why would they bring them over? Well, I wouldn't be shocked if in the future we find out they are actually getting some benefits, but, well, I won't be asserting that until we know that they are. Anyway, Tory free traders try not to be pro-mass migration challenge impossible. But to be fair to them, there seems to be two factions on the Tory side, with Andrew Griffiths saying this, making the point that after Starmer has just signed a deal which exempts Indian workers transferred to the UK from paying national insurance, he, in the end, did increase this national insurance for British workers. And they've come up with a decent tagline, to be fair to them. Every time Labour negotiates, Britain loses. And there's no better example of that than the Mauritius deal, to be fair. This one, while there's a lot of good in it, this bad is just not worth... It's not worth it. It's just not. Especially in the political climate we find ourselves in. When Sky News is against you because of immigration issues, you've gone wrong somewhere. Completely wrong. Express journalist Christian Calgi makes the point as well that Kemi Badenoch, while serving as Trade Secretary, held up India negotiations such as this one because she refused to cave on the visas and national insurance issue, and Labour is now being accused of giving tax breaks to companies who import foreign workers. There's enormous criticisms on this trade deal due to the national insurance contribution for Indian workers for 3 years being exempt, despite Starmer hiking it for the British workers. This is largely what people are annoyed at, and again, you can have all the defence of it's reciprocal all you want, but if basically no British person is going over to work for British companies in India, then what's the point in any of this? This is clearly a massive win for India. And Suella Braverman says Labour have caved and opened our labour markets to more Indian workers who will be cheaper to hire than Brits. Yep, absolutely true. And again, this was all happening under Rishi Sunak. If you want to ruin an ethnic day, just make the point that all of these ethnic minorities here, Kemi Badenoch, Suella Braverman, and Rishi Sunak, have managed to do more to protect English and British interests than the Labour Party, which is mostly a cabinet made up of native Brits. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Our biggest issue at the moment is lovey lefty native Brits than it is these based and frankly integrated ethnic minorities that we have. Just ethno-nationalism's in the toilet. It's over. It's over. Civic nationalism's won. Get over it. Anyway, Kemi comes out agreeing with Andrew Griffiths, saying that this is a two-tier tax from two-tier Keir. I refuse to sign the deal because the tax refunds for India is not available to us. The visa requests are too high. The ceramic and aluminium industries would be screwed. Andrew is 100% correct. When Labour negotiates, Britain loses. And fair enough to her. It's good that she managed to find something she agrees with while doom scrolling at 4:25 in the afternoon. So your workday wasn't quite finished, Kemi Badenoch, but I'll let it go. Jerrick as well weighed in on this because I suppose he's the the de facto leader of the Tories, despite what Kenny Baynock's position is. So this trade deal means Indian workers here for less than 3 years will not have to pay national insurance. Starmer has hiked national insurance on Brits while giving exemptions to Indian migrants. British workers come last in Starmer's Britain. I suppose the other funny thing you can point out about this is that, well, Brits who go over to India will still have to pay those national insurance contributions, which have been raised too. What's the actual advantage of going to India here? I don't understand. You know, there's a reason, like, the Tories were actually correct. Like, base Tories, to be frank with you on this one, well done for not going into this trade deal. Thank God some of you had brains, but elections have consequences, and this was pretty much going to be an inevitable one. Anyway, Nigel Farage up next, and he made a little video on this issue.
So Keir Starmer has signed a free trade deal with India. Good, you might think. India, very, very important country, and one with whom we do need closer links and relations. And yet, if you look at the detail, it's truly extraordinary.
And he goes into the national insurance contributions, exemptions, etc., etc. We don't need to go into details of that. Let's get to your opinion, Nige. This seems like a bad thing. Is it a bad thing?
It means overall, it's about 20% cheaper to employ an Indian after this deal than it is to employ a British worker. On top of that, there are no limits to this deal at all. And bear in mind that 500,000 people, yes, 500,000 people, have come into the UK from India in the last 2 years alone.
That's post-Boris wave as well, by the way. They're not Boris waivers, they're Sunak waivers. But yeah, I suppose you could argue, well, there is actually a limit on it. It's by the number of people that these Indian companies can actually employ. But that's without even mentioning the whole visas for their dependents issue as well, along with more visas for professional workers, which they say include people I don't see why we need. Musicians, yeah, maybe fair enough, but yoga instructors and chefs? I don't think so. The hospitality industry is hemorrhaging money for the simple fact that people can't afford it, because we're frankly in all but official name in a recession.
It's honestly impossible to predict how many hundreds of thousands more will come on this deal. There's been no impact assessment, no analysis of cost, and absolutely no analysis of what this will mean for burdens on the health service and elsewhere.
I suppose the argument back is they still need to pay for the health service, but I really don't think £1,000 per person coming over is going to solve the NHS issue. I think it's not particularly going to be paying more into the system, taking out necessarily, but I guess we'll see.
This government doesn't give a damn about working people. The Labour Party have this time, in a big, big way, betrayed working Britain. And that's why many people voted for us last Thursday. But for some reason, the government just doesn't seem to understand.
Reform are also brushing 30% in recent polling, and this is Sky News Times and YouGov polling. This is kind of, if there's any polling you're going to believe, it should be this one. They've absolutely nailed it. They've taken the votes off the Conservatives. They are the right-wing party of Britain now. And what's the reason for that? Well, probably for things like this. You know, you've got half the Tories supporting this deal. You have no one in Reform supporting it because of the very specifics of, okay, we like the stuff that's going to improve the economy. Why did you need to do that with the stuff that's actually going to be detrimental to the least well-off in the country, which is, you know, working wages are going to be compressed even more again, because India can send over a load of Indians to work for their companies here now at a cheaper rate. Is it exactly 20%? I'm not entirely sure. I've not crunched the numbers myself, but the spirit of the thing, it's still cheaper. It ain't good. This is why you are seeing polls like this from incredibly reputable sources. Anyway, James McMurdoch as well also had a weigh-in on this. Reforms, paper candidate, fair enough to him. So this is shocking. Starmer's deal with India means Indian workers won't pay any national insurance. He's rigged the job market against the British. I simply can't believe what I'm seeing. Again, this is the general consensus from people, and it's completely reasonable. We're in an era where to get anywhere in politics, you have to be serious about actually stopping immigration, and this is why the Tories are dying a death, because nobody believes they're serious on it. And this is despite the fact that they've just come out with this, the new deportation bill, which again is effectively, people say, I have no doubt, oh, this is flanking Reform on the right. It's not. It's copying their homework again. Automatic deportations for people who arrive in Britain legally, Reform policy. Disapplying the Human Rights Act to all immigration matters, that's not Reform policy, that's certain exemptions for it. Reform want to completely dismantle it. Doubling indefinite leave to remain requirement for 5 to 10 years. I don't think Reform have really gone on to that, but I know it's a popular opinion to just get rid of it entirely. New powers to remove leave to remain for anyone who has become a burden on Britain, whatever that means. Again, how's that not just getting rid of criminals? A legally binding MP-backed annual cap on migration, wherever I heard that before. Tight again, actually, that's Reform policy, and it's probably lower with Reform. Visa sanctions from uncooperative countries. Don't think Reform have gone on about that, but sensible. Powers to deport foreign criminals. Reform policy. Removing GDPR protections from foreign criminals and illegal migrants. Reform haven't gone on about that, but good idea. And finally, mandatory scientific age testing for asylum seekers. Okay. Well, to be honest, if you get rid of illegal migration being a route to getting asylum, you solve that problem anyway, but either way, it's fine. But the general reaction I've seen to this is, yeah, I just don't believe them and don't care. It's too late. You had 14 years to do something like this and you did nothing. In fact, when you had your best chance to do something about it under Boris Johnson, you made the whole thing worse. So why would anyone believe you now? Anyway, at this point I've gone through the mainstream points on this, but I do want to give a shout out to an excellent, and I mean excellent, Twitter account that is definitely one of the most positive aspects of Musk's Twitter. The amount Calimo, or Ascended Yield, is an absolutely excellent and ahead of the curve commentator on economics in Britain, along with dealing with other right-wing issues such as crime and all that, but he is very good on his economics. Not all his suggestions are perfect, but whose are, but he is certainly a positive of Twitter. And he said back in December, literally last year, if Keir Starmer ends up signing the trade deal with India, there will most definitely be a social security deal. This is one of the main things currently blocking the deal. And under the deal, Indian migrants will be exempt from national insurance contributions as they will make payments in the Indian pension system instead. And this will be a slap in the face to British workers who just had their national insurance contributions increase and are currently facing the highest tax burden in history. Why is no one talking about this? Well, he got his wish. Unfortunately, it's while it was too late. Because everyone's talking about this now, I'm just saying it's reciprocal means absolutely nothing when barely any British workers are going over to work in India to make benefit of the exemption over there. In fact, they'd probably be better off stopping their national insurance contributions here and paying into the Indian system for the 3 years. That's how bad our tax is at the moment. He also goes on to point out that 99% of Indian exports now have zero duties, and these are overwhelmingly carbon-intensive industries. The kind of economic activity we have just outlawed in the UK with stupid environmental policies that they are going even harder on. Will environmental groups make any noise about this? No, of course they won't, because all they care about is degrowthing Britain. So thanks for that. Another issue that Calimo brings up, again to do with carbon taxes, is that Indian trade is exempt from it. They can pump out all the CO2 they want, and they are not put under the same pressures as UK-based companies, and there's nothing in the trade deal to say, oh, well, if you're making some carbon, you have to pay for that to us. It's just not even in it at all. So this is actually helping out an awful lot the production of Indian goods and helping undercut British businesses as well. There's been a load of pottery places in Stoke, I believe it is, that have closed down, ones that have lasted literally centuries, and they're all citing the national insurance contributions, high energy prices, all the classic stuff that everyone goes on about for the economy. And they're saying we're on life support, we can't do anything. 3 of the biggest companies have closed down and they've been around since the Victorian period. This is a disaster. They survived 2008, for God's sake, and we're at a point where Labour doesn't seem to care. They'd rather get pottery over from India instead. That's the priority here. There's an awful lot of good to free trade, but unfortunately when you are tightening your own economic output in Britain due to ridiculous planning laws and red tape and regulation, you absolutely have to sort that out before you focus on free trade, but they're doing it the complete wrong way, so it's going to make it worse. Anyway, it's safe to assume that the British side has folded, Indian exports are overwhelmingly carbon intensive, and Modi's government has made hitting $1 trillion in exports a top priority. Can't wait to see Miliband explain to what's left of the British industry base what we had to destroy of our own manufacturing for the climate while opening the door to high emission Indian goods. It's treason, according to Camillo. That is a word that I try not to use lightly, but it's hard to argue against. But finally, he goes through what we actually benefit from all this, and it is, as Camillo's understanding, 0.168% of UK GDP over the long run. That's less than 4 weeks of Tesco revenue. Apparently, this is over the long run. Not it wasn't per year. I was wrong. It's 4.8 billion added to the UK economy over probably something like 5 years. That is humiliating, as Camillo says. It's a month of Tesco revenue in 5 years with this deal with India, in which they basically win everything. And as I say, Indian companies are probably going to take advantage of the cheaper work they can send over here with their families. Thanks, Starmer. Anyway, I think the problems with this deal have been done to death at this point. I also don't see what's stopping anyone from setting up a company in India, being based in Britain, and then effectively directly importing workers from India to then work for that company you set up as a base in India. I'm sure there's loopholes to this that I'm sure will be exploited, and I'm sure we'll end up with egg on the Labour side's face. But hey, at least we get cheaper prawns, I guess. Again, I'm for free trade, but it's hard not to be very cynical about all this when everyone in the mainstream who's for free trade seems to be absolutely mad when it comes to the immigration side of free trade. You can have free trade without mass immigration. You wouldn't think that from the way the free traders in the Tory party talk about this, but you've got to bear in mind that largely Reform is full of people who believe in free trade, and none of them want mass migration, so trust me, we exist. Anyway, I think with that it's everything I had for you for today. So Thursday evening it'll be more Subnautica gameplay, and then over on the Worcester Club on Tuesday it's Tosh Talks. Don't know what the subject is yet, but I'm sure we'll have an answer for you by Monday. And then next Saturday it's Laughing at the Guardian with some whamming. Videos out as and when I can make them. If you wish to support the channel, please do subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment. Those are excellent and free ways to help me out in the algorithm. And you, of course, can become a channel member or leave a super chat or super thanks. Those are very, very good and direct ways to help the channel too. Right, with that, that's everything I had for you for today. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.